My personal path? Well,
this is what we're doing this afternoon.
It's now 3 or thereabouts. I should be able to finish by 7. I'm curious to know if anyone is any older than I am in the room. I'm 61.
Hand to go up. Nope, not as old as you.
Okay. So, therefore, and I'm going to call you Kathy. Is that wrong?
It is wrong, Lori.
Lori. It ended in the Y sound. Yeah, I mean the E sound.
We'll call you James.
Better than Fluffy. So, Lori and I remember back in the ancient days of the 60s, when we were growing up. And so I was in high school in the 60s, and I graduated early from high school. I was 16. And then I thought, I'm really bored. And I was living in Oklahoma, and by a couple of different means, I was able to graduate from college when I was 18. Then I thought, oh, what shall I do now? I'm really bored. But I should probably get some further education out of the way, so I got admitted to medical school in Oklahoma, which was the only school that would admit me at age 19 by then. Then I decided to take a long trip to Africa before starting. So I went to Africa, and I joined the Pokot tribe in East Africa after traveling overland from West Africa to East Africa. And then I thought, you know, I'm not sure I'm ready to go back to Oklahoma. This is much more exciting. So I flew to London, and I crossed overland to Nepal, and I heard about Ayurveda from the Peace Corps physician. And then I thought, Ayurveda, that's very interesting. This is a good excuse. Back at that time, even now, but especially back then, if you were traveling in South Asia, you needed to have a reason, because people would say, oh, how are you? Why are you here? What are you doing? So it was, oh, I'm studying Ayurveda, even though I really don't know the word.
If you were a man, if you're a woman, they say, hello, darling, I love you, darling. Are you a dog? Are you a cat? The little kids. That's what the little kids will say. It's
and
story
everybody
time.
else would say, oh, hello, darling, are you married? Where is your husband?
There's that too.
Yeah. But they didn't ask me that, happily. Anyway, went down to India again and went to Bombay and happened to meet the right people at the right moment. In the space of like about 4 days, I had gone to Pune, met Dr. Lad, got admitted into the Ayurvedic college.
Which is just freaking miraculous. I spent a year trying to get into a BAMS program and came home with hepatitis A, almost dead. So the fact that he did it in 4 days.
After I was already in the Ayurvedic college and spent my Hep A experience in Dr. Lad's house. Anyway.
Good karma, bad karma.
No, different karma. Literally, I met some people outside a restaurant. The next day I had dinner with them. And then the next day I met the people in the flat just below them. And then 2 days later I met the most eminent Ayurvedic physician in India, and he gave me a letter.
Not at all jealous.
Admit this to, no, keep breathing. Not at all jealous.
Not at all jealous.
And then I went to Pune, and then suddenly there I was. So then I came back to the U.S., then I lived in India for 6 years, and I graduated from the college, and then I came back for a year, and then I lived in Bombay for 4 years, and here I am now.
You forgot, you left out the most important part.
Meeting my mentor?
Meeting me.
Then, that was 1985 or 86, when Claudia was a teenager living in Vermont, in Worcester, or in Calais, or between Worcester and Calais. And she seemed to be a very interesting and precocious teenager. I visited with her briefly. And then 2 years later, I met her again. And she was in Benares studying the University of Wisconsin's program of year-long study of Hindi in Benares. And both of us are very fond of Benares, not only because that's where we met, because Benares is a very unique place. And then we got to know one another. And then we've got to know one another better. And then Claudia tried to get into the Ayurvedic college and did not.
Bad karma, good karma.
And then, but she did get into the Oriental Medical College and then studied with Dr. Lod and studied this, did that. And let's see, we calculated the other day, we've taught together now in 12 countries. And we'll be teaching again in India in December. And
so to me, what it seems like in life is that nothing is ever as it seems, or at least nothing is ever only as it seems. So the obvious reason why I'm here, I'll get to, but I think the real reason why I'm here is a letter that my guru wrote me before I met him. I met my guru's guru when I was 3 years old in Boston. And then he passed away a couple years afterwards. And I don't know if this would have happened to me otherwise or if it was the influence of having seen him, but I really wanted to know who God was. And I didn't know how to express that as a little kid. But I remember a couple of very distinct pangs. And then, so my guru's guru passed away. A couple years later, somebody found my guru, his successor, in India, and they were going to go see him. And I said, would you bring him a letter for me? And at this point, so this was a few years later, and it was, by this point, I was 7, or 8, 7 or 8. And I sent him a letter, and it's clearly in a little kid's scrawl. And I don't remember what I said, but I must have said, I love you in it. And I had a connection. So the person brought the letter to him and went to India. And at the time, there's no internet, there's no phone. So this letter is the only way to communicate. So they brought a letter back for me. And the letter I still have to this day. It's my most cherished possession. And in this letter, among other things, he didn't talk to me like a child. And clearly it was a child's writing. But he just talked to me like a human being. And in this letter, one of the things he said was, keep good company. Good company makes a man great. And so life moved on. It was very chaotic. I had a very unorthodox, bizarre childhood. Went through, was always interested in herbs. As I was growing up, I had a little box that had photographs of the local herbs here in Vermont. I moved to Vermont when I was 8, shortly after meeting my guru, because he came over when I was 8 and I met him. So then my family moved to Vermont, and I had this little box of photographs of herbs, and on the back it was written what they were good for and where you'd find them and recipes you could make stuff out of, and I was very interested. But life was chaotic and crazy, and then I became a teenager and went to high school. I was taught at home for 5 years before high school, so I had a little time to look at that stuff. But then high school came, and forget it, that was gone. But I was still interested in medicine and herbs and India because of my guru. So one thing happened after another. I met Dr. Svoboda, and honestly, when we first met, I wasn't that impressed. I thought he was arrogant and too young to know anything. Of course, I was the one who was too young to know anything. So I met him briefly in Vermont. He claims he remembers me, but I don't think I was that memorable, especially since I probably was putting off vibes like, oh, you're too young to know anything. At 15, I'm putting off this vibe. But what else is a 15-year-old supposed to do?
Annalyn's kitchen, though, is memorable.
We met in Annalyn's kitchen. It's true.
It was easy enough to remember you there.
Okay, but then timing. A few years later, but I loved his book. So his book Prakriti, when it came out, was my Bible, and I just went through that over and your Prakriti, your Ayurvedic Constitution. That was my Bible. I read it. There were like 2 books: Dr. Lod's little red book and Dr. Svoboda's little book on Prakriti. And so they both, especially Prakriti, was really my Bible because it just said it was familiar. It was familiar. So it was all marked up. So then we had a mutual friend, Shamdas, who said to Robert, when Robert was going to Benares, he said, oh, you got to go meet Claudia. She speaks Hindi. You can have a good time. So in India, you get these little blue, flimsy notes, and so I got one from Dr. Svoboda saying, I'm going to be here at this time. And again, I remember the first time we saw each other. It was in Benares, and I was at the Vijayanagaram Bhavan in Pelapur, and he walks in through this, into the courtyard through this gate, and I saw him, and it was just fast friends rickshawing through Benares, telling stories and sharing stories, and that was great. And I was in India, and I had planned to go through this University of Wisconsin program to study Ayurveda. This was not a popular subject when I was a kid. No, it was pre-Deepak Chopra. Nobody knew of Ayurveda. I had a lot of respect for my dad, who had zero respect for Ayurveda and zero respect for holistic medicine in general. He was a Western medicine devotee, in a sense. And I say devotee because there's sort of a blind, sometimes we can have a blind trust in a kind of medicine, whether it's Ayurveda or Chinese medicine or Western medicine. So his trust was in Western medicine, and his bias, I would say, was against holistic medicine. So he was not at all interested in that. And I really had a tremendous amount of respect for my father. So it was not lightly that I completely ignored his perspective, but I did. I went my own direction. And so I went to India to study Ayurveda. I got there and I thought, I have no idea what's going on in this country. And I just couldn't bring myself to just focus on Ayurveda, because I just couldn't, I couldn't get the context of things by just studying Ayurveda. So I chose to study Benares Hindu winter festivals, which my monitors said to me, I think, Vince said, I think I speak for both of us, him and Allison, when I say, we wish you were taking this seriously. And I was taking it seriously. So I ignored their advice too, and I studied Benares Hindu winter festivals instead of Ayurveda. And in terms...
And did you take them seriously?
I took them very seriously. And had an incredible mentor, Om Prakash Sharma, may he rest in peace, and who Dr. Svoboda also knew separately. How's that for karma? So I was studying Benares Hindu winter festivals. In doing so, you have to study the lunar months. And in so doing, you have to study the 30 tithis, which is to say you start getting a sense of how things are organized in Indian thought, and according to the moon and the moon's phases, and because all the festivals are, it's not like Christmas, which is always on December 25th. The festivals are on the 5th night of the waxing fortnight of this month of the moon, right? So, or the waning fortnight. So you really contextualize that way. And it's one of those things. It was like a jumping off the cliff thing. It made no sense. Nobody supported the idea. And it turns out in retrospect to really have been important, because it familiarized me with Indian thought and contextualized it in a way that I think helped allow my future mentors to feel more comfortable with my life perspective and share things they may not have been able to share. So it turned out to be very useful, and I went back home and I was on a pre-med track, and I decided in my junior year of college, it was so secure to hang on to that pre-med track. And I decided maybe I would do chiropractic instead of Western medicine, because I wasn't that interested in drugs or surgery, which are the two therapies in Western medicine. So I thought maybe chiropractic, but not because I loved chiropractic, but because I liked medicine. And so I thought, I'll do chiropractic, and I'll do it long enough that I can make some money, and then I can study Ayurveda. And then I thought, let me just jump off a cliff here. I could see myself living my whole life to do this, to do that, to do this. I'll do chiropractic so that I can do this, so that I can do what I really want to do, rather than really working hard at what I really wanted to do. So I decided that I would jump off the cliff. It made zero sense to study Ayurveda. That's what I would do. And because it was my dharma, in the sense that I could see clearly, this is what I want to do. And I liked to work. I was self-motivated. I was ambitious, much more than I am now. And I went to India again after I graduated, and I tried for that year to get into a BAMS college, and I was studying while I was doing that. And exhausted myself. It's a long story, but I ended up getting hepatitis A through bad water and getting the worst case that a doctor in Delhi had ever seen. Almost died, came home, got myself back together, went back to the Ayurvedic Institute, which I had gone to for a while, and then went back, didn't know what I was going to do, went to Chinese medical school, which I had zero interest in, but I had respect for a mentor at the time, Hart Defoe, who was a Jyotishi, who said, this is what you're going to do. I said, how about not? How about I go through Western medicine? He said, that'll kind of drive you crazy, but this is what you're going to do. I said, well, how about I not? And then how about I just do Ayurveda and see where things go? And he said, look, you're arguing with me about this, but this is what's in your chart. This is what you're going to do. And that's what I did. So which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did I do it because I respected him, or did I do it because I was going to do it anyway, and that was just the impetus? Who knows? But I did it, and within about 6 months of Chinese medical school, I finally thought, oh, this is good. This is a good compliment. And I'm really grateful I did it, because I got a really good clinical background. At the time, you couldn't get a good clinical background in Ayurveda. Still difficult. Still, that's one of the challenges, is getting lots of patient practice. And you could get that through Chinese medicine. And you could also become, in New Mexico, a primary care practitioner, because it was an extensive enough medical background that they consider you a primary care practitioner. So you get covered by insurance. So I opened my practice, and boom, it was busy, and I did that for 10 years. And then I'll just put this in here too. While I was doing that, I was also teaching at the Chinese medical school, teaching women's health and learning about women's health, and finding out that what's very important for women is to start slowing down and reducing their stress by the age of 35 because of hormonal considerations that I talk about in the Healthier Hormones course in the book. I was so convinced about this that intellectually, because I'm Pitta, and so there's this sharp mind, and I had to be convinced about it intellectually in order to follow suit. It's very difficult. We'll talk about Pitta soon, and it's very difficult for Pitta people to voluntarily slow down. But I was intellectually convinced enough that the month that I turned 35, I gave my busy private practice to someone else in exchange to being able to just go practice there part-time. I did that because my teaching and my writing and my traveling was starting to pick up at that point. And if I was keeping it all going, I would be a complete hypocrite and run myself into the ground. So I was starting to teach at the Ayurvedic Institute. I think I taught there for 8 years, in the second year and first year and so forth, and I ended doing that somewhere in, I think, 2010. And so then I got to this room. But the point about my guru's letter is that through all of this, what it looked like to me, from a certain point of view, the obvious story is I had a real interest in health in India, and that combined in a good, happy little way to make me interested in Ayurveda, and so I studied Ayurveda, which was my great passion, and now here I am. But I think that underneath everything, Ayurveda is not my passion. It's not. I love it. This is great. I love, like you say, showing up to work, doing this for work. It's wonderful. But the thing that I think that has been the most important thing, possibly, is the good company. The study of Ayurveda has been a vehicle to keep good company throughout my life. It's given me incredible company. Dr. Svoboda, Dr. Lod, who I was fortunate enough to be with for a long time. There's no room that I'm in my work where I'm not with good company. Good company is interesting. Like, what is that? I've spent a long time, because my guru chose his words carefully. What is good company? And I've gone through all kinds of distortions in my head about what's good company. But I think in the final analysis, anything that improves me to some degree is good company. So I've been in it for a long time. So nothing is ever quite as it seems. It seems like maybe we're here to study Ayurveda, but on another level, we're here for good company. And on another level, we're here because all of our karmas have brought us to this room, and who knows what we're going to do when we leave this room. So.
Well, just now we're going to go do Yoga Nidra.
Very, very soon. So this afternoon seemed to be story time. I hope that's okay, but it felt like a wasted opportunity if we didn't get to know each other a little bit.
Also,
What?
we have awaited
The machinery.
The paving machinery.
Good. So anybody wants to share before? We have 4 more minutes. Let's not try to do anything today, this afternoon, besides this.
Dr. Svoboda, can you tell us about your mentor, how you came to be with him?
I met him because when I was at the college, I didn't want to burden my parents by having them support me while I was in India. They were happy that I was in one place instead of, because this was the early 70s, and I had been traveling through, in places like Africa and India. It cost, when you could find a telephone, it cost $5, the equivalent of today's $5 a minute to phone to the U.S. So, I'd phone my parents. Yeah, hi, I'm okay, I'm still alive. I was great. Okay.
And by the way, when you did that, because this was my experience in '88, the first year I lived in India, I spoke to my family once in the whole year, because you'd place a trunk call and you'd wait around for hours if you were lucky, but in Benares it was days, to have them call you back. The operator would somehow patch the call in, and it would take days. And
if you happened to go off and need to take a wee and the call came through, then you'd go back to the end of the queue again.
It was bad.
So, the point is that I decided that I needed to figure out ways to support myself. Fortunately, I had a very lucrative summer job before I left the U.S., and then I also got a couple of grants, and one of the grants was from the National Endowment of the Humanities to write a report on Ayurveda and how it was being used in Pune. So I interviewed a bunch of Ayurvedic doctors, and one of the doctors at the hospital knew somebody who knew my mentor, and he said, he has studied Ayurveda and Jyotish and all kinds of stuff, and you should go interview him. I said, well, he lives in Bombay. He said, yes, but he comes to Pune regularly because he owns thoroughbred racehorses, and there's a big monsoon in Bombay, and the racetrack is under a foot of water during the monsoon. So they race in Pune during the monsoon. And so he happened to be there, so I happened to go and meet him, and we started to enjoy one another's company, and then we continued enjoying one another's company, and then 8.5 years went by. So, and he had studied Ayurveda, though not in what is now the conventional method of going to a college. He apprenticed with an Ayurvedic doctor in Benares, Trimbakam Shastri, which was back the traditional way of doing things. You found a guru, you apprenticed with the guru, you learned what you needed to learn, and only when the guru decided that you were in a position to actually go out and be of, more of a benefit than a potential detriment to society, would the guru permit you to go out and do something. But it's all thanks to the thoroughbred horse that I met him. So I've been fond of thoroughbred horses ever since.